Title: The Orchard's Echoes. The sun had barely crested the horizon, casting a warm glow over the orchard as Lydia stepped out of her car. She took a deep breath, inhaling the cool, crisp air that smelled faintly of dew and apples. The trees stood tall and proud, their branches laden with fruit that seemed to whisper secrets of past summers. The orchard looked exactly as it did in her memories, but the ache in her chest told her that not everything would be the same today. "Lyd, come on, we're gonna be late," as Charlotte's voice called out from the distance, breaking the tranquility of the early morning. Lydia looked up and saw her ex-girlfriend striding towards her, a basket swinging by her side. Despite the chilly breeze, she felt her cheeks grow hot at the sight of Char's confident stride and the casual wave she offered. This was their place, a sanctuary where they had shared laughs, kisses, and dreams of forever. But that was before the storm had hit their relationship, leaving only fragments of what once was. "Good morning," Lydia managed to say, her voice sounding small and unsure even to her own ears. She watched as Char's eyes flickered over her, noticing the new haircut and the way she clutched the ladder like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Ready to tackle the trees?" Char's smile was forced, but Lydia clung to it like a lifeline. She nodded, trying to ignore the tremor in her voice as she said, "Yeah, I'm ready." The two of them walked in silence to the first row of apple trees. Lydia felt the weight of the past pressing down on her shoulders, each step heavier than the last. She knew she had to be strong, to not let her fears and insecurities get the better of her. This was a chance to start anew, or so she hoped. As they approached the first tree, Char reached for a ladder, her eyes never leaving Lydia's. "You remember how to do this, right?" she asked, her voice holding a hint of challenge. Lydia nodded, gripping the ladder's wooden frame tightly. She didn't want to admit that her hands were already shaking. The climb was torturous, every rung a step closer to facing the truth. Lydia's heart raced as she ascended, the world shrinking below her. She focused on Char's voice, grounding herself in the here and now. It was a beautiful day, the kind of day that could make anyone forget their troubles. But as she reached for the first apple, she couldn't help but feel that the sweetness of the moment was just a facade. The orchard's echoes. That's what Lydia had started to call it in her mind. The place where their laughter used to echo through the trees, where the whispers of their love filled the air. Now, all she heard was the heavy silence that seemed to cling to every leaf. She glanced down at Char, who had begun filling her basket without a word. Lydia's chest tightened as she realized she didn't know how to fix this. With each apple she picked, she felt a piece of her heart slip away. The orchard had been a symbol of their love, but now it felt like a cage. She knew she had to get down before she shattered completely. As she descended, her legs wobbled with each step, but she refused to let go of the ladder. She had to be strong, for herself and for what they had once had. The thud of the apples hitting the ground snapped her out of her trance. She turned to see Char standing there, her expression unreadable. The wind rustled through the leaves, carrying the scent of crushed fruit and the bitter taste of regret. "You okay?" Char asked, her voice devoid of the warmth Lydia had hoped for. Lydia nodded, her throat tight with unshed tears. She couldn't believe this was happening. The next few minutes were a blur of awkward small talk and avoiding eye contact. They moved to the next tree, the silence between them as palpable as the weight of the apples in the basket. Lydia tried to ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach, the fear that today's trip wasn't just about reconnecting over their shared past. When Char finally spoke, it was with a bluntness that took Lydia by surprise. "Lyd, we need to talk," as she said, her eyes on the horizon. Lydia's heart skipped a beat. She knew what was coming, had felt it in the air for weeks now. But she hadn't expected it here, in their orchard, surrounded by the ghosts of their happiest moments. "What is it, Char?" Lydia's voice was a mere whisper, the words barely making it out. She braced herself for the blow, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. Char took a deep breath and turned to face her, her gaze unyielding. "I think we should take a break," she said, the words cutting through the silence like a knife. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, and Lydia had to grab onto the tree to keep from falling. She searched Char's eyes for any sign of doubt, of the love she knew was there. But all she found was resignation. "Why?" she croaked out, her voice breaking. "You know why," Char replied, her tone firm. "You've been smothering me. I need space." The words hung in the air like the last echo of a dying note. Lydia felt the last piece of her shatter. "But I thought we could work it out," as she protested, her voice small and lost. "We've been trying," Char said, her voice softer now. "But maybe we need some time apart." She paused, then continued, "I still care about you, Lyd. But I can't do this anymore." Lydia felt the tears spill over, her body shaking with the force of her emotions. "But what about us?" she choked out. Char took a step closer, reaching out to wipe away a tear with her thumb. "We'll always have the orchard," as she murmured, her voice filled with a sadness that matched Lydia's. The next few moments stretched out like hours as they stared at each other, the weight of their decision heavy between them. Lydia knew she had pushed too hard, had been too much. But she had never meant to drive Char away. She nodded, her eyes still glued to Char's. "Okay," she whispered, the finality of the word echoing through her soul. They walked back to the car in silence, the only sound the crunch of their feet on the gravel. The orchard, once a bastion of love and joy, now felt like a prison, each tree a silent sentinel bearing witness to the end of their relationship. Lydia's heart was heavy as she climbed into the passenger seat, the taste of goodbye bitter in her mouth. As Char drove away, she couldn't help but wonder if the echoes of their love would ever truly leave the orchard. The orchard's echoes. It was a name that had grown in Lydia's mind over the past few months, a constant reminder of what they had lost. She had hoped that coming here today would rekindle the flame, but instead it had only served to highlight the embers that remained. She stared out the window, watching the rows of trees blur into a sea of green and red, her thoughts racing. The car pulled to a stop at the edge of the orchard, and Lydia stepped out, the cool breeze a stark contrast to the heat of her emotions. She took a deep breath and turned to face Char, her voice shaking. "What happens now?" she asked, her eyes searching Char's for any sign of hope. Char's expression was unreadable. "Now we go our separate ways," she said, her voice firm. "We'll still see each other around town, but we need to move on." Lydia nodded, her throat tight with unshed tears. She didn't know if she could bear the thought of seeing Char with someone else, laughing and loving without her. But she knew she had to try. The orchard stood as a silent sentinel to their past, each tree a marker of moments that could never be rewritten. They had picked their last apple together, and now they had to learn to let go. The air was thick with unspoken words and the weight of what was left unsaid. "Thank you for today," Lydia whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "For giving me closure." Char nodded, her eyes never leaving the horizon. "It's what we both needed." With a final, lingering look, Lydia turned away from the orchard, each step feeling like a nail in the coffin of their love. She didn't look back, afraid that if she did, she would see the echoes of their past, reaching out to pull her back in. The orchard would always be there, a testament to what they had shared. But now, it was time for her to create new memories, to find a new place where she could breathe without the weight of the orchard's echoes crushing her spirit. The drive back to town was quiet, the only sounds the hum of the engine and the occasional sniffle from Lydia. She felt like a part of her was being torn away, leaving a gaping wound in her chest. But she knew that she had to be strong, had to move on. She had to find a way to live without the woman who had once been her entire world. When they reached the edge of the orchard, Char pulled over and killed the engine. "Lyd," she said, her voice thick with unshed emotion. "I'm sorry it had to end like this." Lydia took a deep, shaky breath. "Me too," she replied, her eyes fixed on her trembling hands. She knew that Char was sorry, but sorry didn't change the fact that they were over. "I guess we both just need to find our way now." They sat there for a moment longer, the silence stretching out between them like a tightrope threatening to snap. Then, with a nod, Lydia opened the door and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The sun was fully up now, casting its golden light over the orchard, illuminating the apples that they had picked together, now lying forgotten in the basket in the back seat. She took one last look at Char, her heart aching, and then she turned and walked away, leaving the orchard and the echoes of their love behind her. The orchard's echoes remained in her mind, a constant reminder of what she had lost. But as she walked towards her future, she knew that she had to let it go. The apples they had picked today would be the last ones they shared. The laughter that once filled these fields would be replaced by the whispers of new beginnings. And so, Lydia moved forward, her eyes on the horizon, ready to face whatever lay ahead. She didn't know where her path would lead, but she knew that she had to follow it, no matter how much her heart begged her to stay. She had to let the orchard's echoes fade away, to make room for the music of her future to fill her life once again. The orchard's echoes was now a part of her past, a chapter in her story that had ended on a bittersweet note. But she knew that with each step she took away from the orchard, she was writing a new chapter, one that she hoped would be filled with more joy than pain. The sun grew warmer as the day progressed, and Lydia found herself lost in thought as she meandered through the town. She had always felt at home here, but now the streets seemed to hold secrets she hadn't noticed before. Every corner brought back a memory of Char. Every face she passed reminded her of their shared laughter and quiet moments. She had to create a new normal, one that didn't include her first love. The town square was bustling with activity, children playing, couples holding hands, and friends chatting over coffee. Lydia took a seat on a bench, watching the world go by. She felt a pang of loneliness but knew she couldn't wallow in it forever. She had to find a way to fill the void that Char had left behind. Maybe it was time to explore those hobbies she had set aside for their relationship, or perhaps it was time to make new friends, people who didn't know the story of the orchard. As the day wore on, she found solace in the simple act of walking. Her feet carried her through streets she had known all her life, yet somehow they felt different now. The world was no longer just the backdrop to her and Char's love story. It was a canvas waiting to be painted with new experiences, new relationships, and new loves. The orchard had been the setting for their romance, but now it was time for Lydia to step out of its shadow and into the light. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the town. Lydia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day's events start to lift from her shoulders. She knew that the orchard would always be a part of her, a reminder of what once was. But she also knew that she was more than just the echoes of her past. She was a woman with a heart full of love and a life full of possibilities. The orchard had been the stage for their love, but now it was just a place, a memory, and she was ready to move on. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, Lydia stood up from the bench, her eyes dry and her resolve firm. She turned her back on the town square, ready to face whatever the night had in store for her. The echoes of the orchard would remain with her, but they would no longer define her. She was Lydia, strong and brave, ready to conquer whatever lay ahead. And as she walked away from the town, the orchard's echoes grew fainter, until all she could hear was the steady beat of her own heart, leading her to her next great adventure. The story of Lydia and Char in the orchard had been a poignant chapter in her life, but it was time to begin writing a new story. One filled with growth, independence, and perhaps, in time, a love that didn't come with the bitterness of the past. Whispers of the Orchard, as she murmured to herself, feeling the weight of the name settle on her shoulders. It was a story of love lost and lessons learned, but also of finding oneself amidst the ruins of a relationship. The cool night air kissed her cheeks as she headed home, her steps sure and steady. Whispers of the Orchard would be a tale of healing and self-discovery. It would be a story that showed others that it was okay to let go, to grow, and to find new beginnings. Lydia knew that she wasn't the same girl who had climbed that ladder so many months ago, her eyes filled with hope and excitement. She was stronger now, wiser. When she reached her apartment, she collapsed onto her bed, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day. The room was quiet, the only sound the faint ticking of her clock. But in her heart, she could still feel the echoes of the orchard, whispering to her, reminding her of the love she had once had. As she drifted off to sleep, she made a promise to herself. She would cherish those memories, learn from them, and use them to build a new life, one that was truly her own. The next morning, Lydia woke up to the sound of rain tapping against her window. It was a fresh start, a clean slate. She pulled on her favorite sweater and stepped outside, letting the cool droplets kiss her skin. Whispers of the Orchard would be her anthem, the story she told herself every day as she moved on from the girl who had been left in the apple orchard. It was the story of a woman who had found the courage to let go and reach for something more. And as she walked down the street, her eyes fixed on the horizon, she knew that she was ready to write the next chapter of her life.